Alrighty. Well, welcome to another episode of the FCMG Podcast. We're here with Jake Boyer today.
Hi. Nice to be here.
Thanks for coming out. Yeah, I appreciate you coming to chat with us. You're a editor-director at PBS right now.
Yes.
So we, as always, we like to chat about the kind of journey that, our guests have taken in getting into their creative professions. And I have a note here that says, new movies with dad.
Yeah, my dad was kind of the one who, well, I always liked watching movies from a young age. I don't know what sort of started that interest, but from ever since I was little, I was always wanting to watch movies and sort of spend all day down in the TV room. And then my dad was kind of like, as I got older, he would start introducing stuff to me. The earliest one I can remember, I think it was like Jurassic Park or something like that.
Yeah.
And that was like when I was like, oh man, that was like at the cusp of like when I could start like watching more like adult stuff, like scary movies and stuff like that. So then from there, it was like mainly just a bunch of like scary movies that he would show me, like The Thing, Alien, Predator, all that.
Oh, geez,
and then that sort of branched out into like more artsy kind of stuff like Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, and then my brothers would show me stuff that they liked, like Sin City, just whatever was out at like the early 2000s that was cool for teenagers to like.
Okay, so it sort of moved from like blockbuster sort of horror scary stuff, like Gremlins, Jurassic Park, like those things, towards like more like pulpy movies.
Yeah, exactly,
Nice.
yeah. So
Awesome.
and then that was sort of like my what made, I guess, like a early cinephile, but my big thing that like made me decide that I wanted to like make movies and like be involved in like the movie making process was some friends of mine had shown me Kevin Smith's Red State when we were at we were in high school at a party, and I was like, oh man, that's like, I like to think, because like whenever you listen to directors talk about like how they got their start, most of the time they're like, oh, there was that one movie that made me decide I wanted to do that, and that Red State was that for me.
Nice.
But yeah, it was I was always really interested in movies from a young age, and it was just something I was really passionate about.
That's a powerful thing. Like when you're a kid and you get these huge, like you're going out to the movie theater, it's, big volume, big screen. Like it's such an experience. And I like, you brought up Jurassic Park, and I swear I had dreams I guess nightmares for like a month of that scene with the dinosaur, the T-Rex just running after the the Jeep. And there's some films like that you just can't, forget.
Exactly. It's etched in your memory
So
forever.
Red State's the one for you.
Yeah, Red State was the one that made me think I can do this. And it sort of like snowballed from there. I just started watching a bunch of at first it was a bunch of Kevin Smith's movies because he was like my like big main role model at the time, and then it was getting more into like other independent directors like Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez, and then sort of as high school it got more and more obscured as it went on, and now I'm at a point where it's just like I'll watch a little bit of everything.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. So that sort of indie inspiration, you mentioned here, as always, we have our list with us. You mentioned that sort of turns you towards YouTube. You became aware of that, and that became like a viable option for you. Right,
yeah. YouTube was a little bit different. Like it was less so the filmmakers that inspired the YouTube decision, and more so watching other people on YouTube. My friends, I forget when exactly, it was probably middle school. I was over at my best friend's house, and he was like, oh, you got to watch this guy. And he put on The Angry Video Game Nerd.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I love him. He's so
and
great.
I was like, oh man, this is hilarious. We could try and do, because I was like just also at that time like messing around with cameras, like the little like point and shoot cameras that you could just barely do video. And I was like, oh, we should try something like this. We should make a YouTube channel. So then we kind of made, for maybe like 2 or 3 years, a YouTube channel that was ripping off like Nostalgia Critic and basically almost verbatim. But that was sort of like how I got my start in like editing and shooting, and sort of like also like writing these like little sketch review type things and directing my friends. And that was like sort of how everything started, almost like 10 years ago now.
Yeah. Angry Video Game's a really inspiring channel too. Like the like there's something about like the production quality adds to the style that he's doing, because it's like it's old nostalgic video games that
exactly
you know the graphics aren't like crazy quality, but there's something still amazing about them.
Right.
I love his sketches, like the
I always liked the Dracula video. That was my favorite one.
Yeah,
when he's like, and it's like all low lighting in his basement. That's fun.
I was a big fan of the who is it? His name just flew out of my head. Bugs Bunny. Where he gets into a fight with Bugs Bunny.
That was, I think, the one that made me think, like, oh, that's what I want to do.
Yeah,
that might have been the one that inspired us.
That's so well done. All right, so yeah, that was at that point you were starting to get into video and stuff in school too.
Yes.
So you're getting towards high school at this point. And you're moving towards like you're picking up video projects where you can.
Yeah.
You're jumping into the morning news. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, that was just if there was ever a scenario in class where it's like, oh, you could write a paper or do a video, I would more often than not do a video, because that was just what was easier to. I mean, I liked writing, but like it was always more fun for me anyway to do a video.
Yeah.
And then when I found out that I could get involved with like the morning announcements doing like their video stuff, I did. Because again, I really like to write. I was part of like the newspaper club, and then sort of towards the middle of my high school career, they added a website and like they started hosting videos and stuff.
Yeah, started going digital.
Yeah. So then I started doing videos for them. And that was like sort of also I moved away from iMovie. That was like as I kind of started to expand my skills, because everything up until then was like I think iMovie 09, and I just never updated it. And then I was working with another guy in that club who he edited on Final Cut 10, and he gave me a copy of his program, and that was sort of like okay, and I expanded my skills a little bit.
Gotcha.
More with that, and then that's what I used almost up through college.
Yeah, that's like a big way that I find a lot of people of our generation are getting into it, because like we kind of had that nice time period where like there was a lot of free stuff you could get on the internet.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like my first introduction with any of the Adobe programs was a friend gave me a portable version of Photoshop on a thumb drive. So I didn't have a computer, but any computer that I could go up to, you could like plug it in and run it off of that little thumb drive, and it was just like, this is like magic.
Exactly. It was my same way. I did that at our local library. I would go in on like a Saturday, like right when they opened, and stay until they closed. There was one time I forget what I was working on, but it might have been like the feature project I mentioned, where I was editing a scene from it, and it was almost time for the library to close, and they did that thing where it's like, if you don't turn the computer off in 30 minutes, it'll automatically restart. And like I was exporting, and it was like, your video will be done in 32 minutes. And I was like, I ran up to the desk. I was like, can I get like 2 extra minutes before you shut this down? And they're like, oh yeah, no problem. But like, yeah,
thank goodness.
I've been there, done that.
Yeah, that's gonna be so stressful.
Yeah. That was terrible.
Yeah, I remember like broadcast in high school was a big thing with our school, because I mean, first of all, you'd get a hall pass and you'd get to just go off and shoot stuff anywhere on property. And then the other thing though was you got to do it with friends. So you'd get to like hang out with friends for an entire period, make stuff together, and then if you had to do homework after school, you were also doing it with your friends.
Exactly. Yeah,
it just became like such a community thing, even in high school. And I think those were precursors to, how it is in real life.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not that, high school isn't real life, but it's definitely an odd microcosm.
Exactly.
So around sophomore year, we're getting to now. You mentioned that you were starting to find that focus on writing, directing, editing. Like those were the sides of the production that you really liked.
Yeah, it was, it was more out of like a kind of a weird, I don't know, like it's a moral sense of like, I have to do all three. Like, it was a quote by Kevin Smith I read at one point where I'm paraphrasing it, but he basically equated it to like, if you were going to make a cake, you wouldn't go out and buy the materials, mix it all together, and then go over to your friend's house and say, here, put this in your oven. Like, he said it just makes sense to be able to do all three. So I kind of like was like, so I kind of really got into like, I have to write it, I have to direct it, I have to edit it, just because I like having sort of complete creative control over something if I can. But sorry, what was the question? I
mean,
lost track.
That kind of like makes it more coherent too. Like having a hand in the pre-production, production, and post-production.
Yeah.
So it was. We're talking about getting into that focus on writer, directing, editing.
Yeah.
This is around sophomore year. This is when you were saying you were getting way into indie film and Tarantino and all that stuff.
Yeah. That was it was getting into indie film and all that, and then it was sort of Kevin Smith like sort of making me believe, oh yeah, I could do all of this stuff if I wanted to, and then also sort of absorbing YouTube content as it evolved, because like more people were starting to do more like narrative driven stuff at the time, like Marble Hornets, and that was like the big thing I really got into was it was this sort of horror anthology web series about Slender Man, and that was like what made me want. Yeah, it's still really good.
What was that called again?
Marble Hornets.
Marble Hornets.
It's all free on YouTube. Yeah, but it was
have a link down in there.
Yeah. It's but that was like sort of my big like Red State made me think, oh, I could be a writer director, but then. When I watched stuff like that, I was like, oh, I want to make like scary stuff, because it was like a very low budget. Okay. It looked really easy to do. So I sort of wrote my own scary movie, basically inspired by that. And I went out to try and make it, and I failed. I think I shot like 2 scenes, and it didn't work out. But then,
that gave you some context on that production process and like doing that sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. And then working on that is what actually led to, me making my first feature about something completely different.
Gotcha.
So it was a nice sort of like precursor to what was to come, I guess.
Okay. Yeah. So you've got the inspiration, like you have Kevin Smith and all these indie film artists and Tarantino, all that stuff. You have a bit of experience in the genre because you've kind of worked in it a little bit in high school.
Barely. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's an introduction. And so this sort of, you went to university after that.
Yes.
Started going to Kutztown, right?
Yeah, I went to Kutztown University. I wanted to kind of go to like an art school, like University Arts in like Philly or NYU, or the big goal was USC, but I know that I couldn't afford to do that. So I went to Kutztown because it was nearby, and the program was really highly recommended by a lot of people. Okay. And I fell in love with the program there. It was a bunch of great professors.
That's so important.
Yeah. They were all really passionate about what they do and teaching it in a coherent way.
Okay.
And yeah, I'd made a lot of friends there, and they were all really like super pumped to like be in projects that I would make. Whenever I'd be like, hey, I have this idea, they would always be like, oh yeah, I'd love to help you with that. So it was a really nice environment to be in.
Yeah. And then we kind of talked about this before, a little bit before the podcast, where I was in the same sort of position where it's like I have to learn to do everything. Like I was at that point, I started to get into it a lot later in my life. So this is after university. I'm in a band, and I started doing photography because I was the guy that had a camera. And then it's like, okay, well then you have to learn how to do our music videos too. And then you have to learn how to do our website, and then you have to learn how to do, it just became like, okay, now I have to take care of all of this, and you just had to learn it.
Right.
And being that like one man band is like, there's a lot of great skill that you can learn by doing that. But then there's something about being thrust into an environment where people are like trying to help you.
Exactly. Yeah. And I kind of, that's like my one regret about my time there, is that I didn't take advantage of that like collaborative environment. Cause I kind of, when I started out, I looked at it as like, oh man, everyone wants to be the next big director, and I have to be better than everyone else. But then when I started to get into like practicum classes where we had to like all collectively produce like a show or a project together, I was like, oh, well, not everyone wants to be a director. Some people just really want to be a good audio engineer, or some people really want to be a good shooter, and they want to help you. Because like no one wants to, they want to like diversify their skill set, and make sure their demo reel is like, here's all this stuff I can do. So I kind of misread the environment when I got there, and I wish that I had kind of not done that, because it would have yielded more impressive stuff, I think. But what happened. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I feel you very much on that subject. I did like the film course that I ended up doing was online. Mm-hmm. So that's like inherently very independent, you know? Right. But I didn't think about it in a collaborative sense, in that there are people in my program who, they're taking digital cinematography, mm-hmm. but they're much more interested in the audio production part of it.
Yeah.
Or like they're much more interested in the editing part of it or the writing part of it. Mm-hmm. And like, meanwhile, I had like stopped reading at that point in my life. So like I wasn't doing any real good writing either. Those go hand in hand in my
mm-hmm.
head. And it was a situation where like, if I had even just had someone spend 45 minutes and write like a treatment for me,
exactly,
it would have given me such a better structure than just being like, well, I have a location and I have a general idea, so I'm just going to wing it and see what happens. That whole collaboration part is like, it's so key in the film industry. So mm-hmm. learning to do that and forcing yourself to do that before you even really have the opportunity is like, that can be huge.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big shift for you. And you said the program took a shift too, where it started off kind of broadcast oriented, right?
Yeah, it was more, the department when I joined was officially called the Department of Electronic Media. And it was more like, we're going to teach you how to be in like broadcast news, and here's how you edit like my fundamentals of video course was mainly about like, here's how you edit a package for a news show, and here's how you record, like, I don't know the term for it, but like a package where there's like no sound and someone's going to talk over it later. Of those. Yeah. And then sort of around like maybe second semester, sophomore year, first semester, junior year, it kind of became, the department changed to Department of Cinema, Television, and Media Production.
Oh, cool.
And then they added more like filmmaking electives and stuff like that. Yeah. So that was, I wish I had maybe taken like a gap year so I had more classes like that. But there was still very good knowledge from a lot of really great professors.
Yeah. Okay. That's really cool. Are there any like courses in particular that you remember that you had some great experiences, like anything that stands out for you?
There was one, I want to say it was field production.
Ooh.
It was field production, and we had to do, I don't even remember. I think it was like a some sort of like short documentary type thing. I don't remember what the project was exactly, but I wasn't really proud of it. And I had this one professor who was like a big, like he was very, I don't know the word. He was very knowledgeable and he was very encouraging, and he's like, "Oh, get out there and make everything you can make." And he's very, nice. But he was also kind of like, it wasn't like, basically, I like to think like Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society. Like, it's sort of like really passionate about what he does, and like he's really a great teacher. And he, like, I wasn't proud of that project, and we screened it. Like, we all had to show our projects in front of the class, and I wasn't really proud of it.
Okay.
And then sort of after class, I was leaving, and he pulled me aside and was like, because we did this thing where you would submit like reviews of your own things. Like, here's what I did. Here's what I'm proud of. Yeah. Here's what I could do better. And I was like really harsh on myself, and like, here's what I could do better.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Why did you hurt your grades so bad? Yours wasn't a bad project." And I was like, "Yeah, well, I wasn't really proud of it." And he pulled me aside and was like, "You got to have more faith in yourself, because trust me, like, you keep going the way you're going, all of those other kids in the class one day are going to say, I knew him back then." And I was like, that was like one of the coolest things anyone had ever said to me. He was a great professor. Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm still in touch with him today. I don't know if he wants to be named, but he knows who he is if he's watching this. Yeah. So he was a really big inspiration. But yeah, there was a bunch of really great classes. We had like a media theory and like a masterpieces in film history class where we like talked about what makes movies good, and like what certain directors do to like enhance their projects. That professor was really good, and always would stay after class to like talk about like what our favorite movies were at the time. And I'm still sending him recommendations to this day.
Yeah.
Like, put this in your masterpieces class, and he was like, okay, yeah, sure. That was full of that. Yeah, that was, and the one other professor, I won't name anybody because I don't know if they want to be named, but she's actively involved in like local film festivals and like making her own projects and stuff. And I still run into her from time to time whenever I submit stuff, and we always like catch up and share on how we're doing. And yeah, the whole department was full of a bunch of great professors.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really huge.
Yeah.
With the film recommendations, I remember you mentioned that was something you did with your YouTube channel for a little while there.
Yeah, that was one channel I really like, yourmoviesucks.org. He does a thing every year or so. He'll release like this 1.5 hour long list where he's like, here's the best movies of the year. I don't know. Are you familiar with that channel or no?
No, and I should be. Like, I feel like that would be right up my alley.
He's really good. Like, he's a very harsh critic, but a lot of the movies, he's like, oh, this is a great movie. I've yet to watch a movie that he thinks is great and be like, that's not that good. It's always a great movie.
Okay, so solid recommendations.
Yeah. So yearly he does a thing where it's like, here's the best movies of this particular year. I think he like alternates. Like this year he did best of like 2007, I think.
Okay.
So he's behind a little bit, but
yeah.
he I was like, oh man, that's really good, because whenever I wasn't doing anything in college, I would be like watching just as many movies as I could. Like one thing you touched on was like exposing yourself to as much media as you can to kind of learn like what works and what doesn't. So that was kind of like my thing is like, I would like, they say you got to read a lot of books to be a good writer. I feel like to be a good director, you have to like expose yourself to as many genres as you can, and not just like what you're focused on. So like be able to deconstruct and find out what works and what doesn't. So I would be constantly watching movies in my free time. They'd be like weird, obscure things no one would even think to watch. And I'd be like, oh man, this is a good movie. I need to recommend this to somebody. And then whenever someone would be like, oh, Jacob, what's a good new movie on Netflix? I would be able to have like a list of like, here's what you can watch. So
you had that prepped here.
Exactly. So, one thing I did with my YouTube channel was sort of like copying his idea, where I'd be like, here's like, I did like a monthly thing where it's like, here's 10 movies I've seen lately that I think are good. And I would do like a 2-minute thing on like, here's why I think it's good. And then here's a clip from the movie. So
gotcha.
And that's kind of how the style he did it, but I tried to like make it a little different.
Yeah.
But the problem is YouTube is like really set up in a way where the copyright system can be abused a lot. So every single time, they're not. I don't think a single one of those videos didn't get hit with a copyright claim.
Oh, jeez.
So the thing that really stung was like, I recommended like one of my favorite movies ever. And like a lot of times when you get a copyright claim on YouTube, it'll be like some corporation representing that filmmaker. But like that particular filmmaker personally put out a copyright claim on that video. And I was like, that really stung. It was, But so that was one thing I did, was like make those like recommendation videos. And I kind of stopped doing that because, for one, I hate the sound of my own voice when I'm like rigidly reading a script, but it was just I didn't want to deal with the copyright claims anymore, so I kind of stopped doing that.
Yeah,
I've been thinking about pursuing that more in like maybe like a podcast form, but I don't know for sure how that'll look yet.
Yeah, depending on the medium, you could really do that in some interesting ways. Like a podcast would be great. I could even see like I wonder if Amazon reviews for movies, because you can do reviews on those, obviously, and I think you can attach like a video section, which you can just put in as audio.
Right.
But you could do like, segments, like even if you did a podcast, cut segments out.
Exactly. Yeah.
There you go. That's multiple uses of your medium there. Okay, so let's see where we were on the list. Okay, yeah. So as your program at Kutztown made that switch from broadcast more into film, you started to work on short films with your friends.
Yeah, I had made a feature film when I was in high school that took like, I think I started the beginning of my junior year of high school, and I didn't finish it until like the first semester at Kutztown.
Oh,
because it was just a long, shooting it took forever just because no one was ever available and like had to work around classes and whatnot. So after I was done with that, I was like, there's got to be an easier way to do this. And that was sort of, I was like, well, I could just try my hand at like short films. So I wrote this like quick thing based off a short story I read, and I got 2 of my friends together. We shot it in like 2 hours, edited it the next day. And I mean, it's not great by like my standards now, but it was like, that sort of made me think, oh, well, not everything has to be this like big, crazy production. I could sort of hone my skills with these. And then if I ever decide I do want to do a feature, it's just a bigger version of that. So
exactly. Yeah.
I haven't attempted another feature yet, but it's been a lot of, I tried to do like one short film per semester I was at Kutztown, and I mostly stuck to that. But yeah, I'm trying to continue that now that I'm out of college. It's been a little bit difficult, but it's something I'm really passionate about in my free time.
So like I'm actually really interested in moving towards filmmaking. Like that's where I want to go. It like, what was that like producing over a long period of time? Because that's something that I always worry about, because there's things like, you know, if you shoot a scene and then you need to do more pickup shots, the weather might change,
right?
You know, especially if it's outdoors,
or
getting your setups right. Like if you have a setup in a certain way, like did you like write down all your setups? Like
pretty much. I lucked out in that it would take a long time to explain, but that feature film was it ended up being mostly in one location the entire time, and it was indoors. So
nice.
The only problem was it was in the library of my high school, and there were like posters on a bulletin board that would change throughout the year. Gotcha. So if you were paying attention, that would be a noticeable thing, but it wasn't too bad for the most part. And my lead actress, who was like in every single scene, like didn't cut her hair or like do anything different. She like saved the same clothes. Like for that entire year, she was like, I'll keep it exactly the same. Don't worry. And yeah, she was great to work with. I worked with her recently on like my most recent short film. So yeah, she's been great to work with.
Gotcha. No, that's fantastic. Like finding someone that you can work with like that is huge. That's like, who is it? There's like a famous combo. It's Brian De Palma and someone.
De Niro? Not De Niro.
Is it De Niro? I think it might be De Niro.
It might, yeah, it might be.
Yeah, because De Niro was Taxi Driver, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think Brian De Palma didn't direct that one, but he like consulted on it or something.
Might have been, yeah. I think Scorsese directed Taxi Driver.
Yeah,
or something. I'm not up to date on that. I
remember the two of them. They were in like film school together, and they started doing just like little shorts and messing around. And then over the years, they got so comfortable working together that it was just like, if Brian got a gig, he'd be like, hey, call up Robert,
right?
Get him over here. That's awesome. Yeah.
But yeah, to answer the question about like producing over a long time, yeah, it is kind of stressful to like make sure, like the one thing I kept on running into is the gist of my movie was like, it was one location of a bunch of people being interviewed about something that happened in the past. And then I would have flashbacks to what they were talking about in that interview. Gotcha. What ended up happening was, those flashbacks just became so hard to shoot that I just didn't shoot them, and I left it as just the whole movie is like one long series of interviews.
Okay.
And I like the version that I wrote better, but I kind of was forced into making it that out of necessity, that no one was ever all available at the same time to do what I needed to do.
So there's a lot of like mitigating.
Yeah, it's messing with people's schedules and like making sure the one thing, like I couldn't afford to pay people back then, but like the thing that obviously you run into any problem is if you have to give some incentive for like people wanting to be in your thing. Otherwise they're not going to be super motivated to show up. So I think that was a big reason why a lot of people dropped out, is that they were like really passionate about it at first, and then they saw how long it was taking, and then they were like, I'm not really interested in this anymore. So
yeah, okay.
But I mean, I can't really blame them, because that's like how I would be in that situation. I think
that's a long grind. But
exactly. Yeah,
that's a heck of an endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it's like every single time you produce something, like I've always thought of it this way, where it's like, I don't really care if I'm super proud of what I put out. I want to be proud of it.
Right.
But it's one of those things where like, I kind of realize that there's a point where you just have to like let it go, and it's frustrating, but at the same time, it's like, okay, this is a learning experience. Next time I do something like that, I'm just going to do it better. Like I'm not going to make all those mistakes that I know that I made.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, other people watch these things, they look at them and they're like, oh, that's fantastic, because they're not aware of all those mistakes and all the what ifs and what could have been, and that's such like it's such a trap for artists,
Mm-hmm.
I always see these, like there's friends of mine that are just incredible artists. Like there's a friend of mine, he does this like sketch art that's mind blowing.
Yeah.
And he does it in his spare time at work, shows it to his friends, and that's it. it like he puts it in like the trash afterwards, and it's like, dude, like we would buy those off of you. Come on. Yeah. Other people like they really appreciate that stuff, and it's like I think that's where a lot of my draw comes from, because like I like to do this, but then hearing people come back and talk about something that, you know, I thought was just okay or could have been way better.
It motivates you for the next one.
Exactly.
A lot of the times, yeah.
Yeah, that makes such a huge difference. All right, so then after Kutztown, you started moving towards that was when you started going towards your role at PBS.
Yeah, it was Kutztown had a class. The very last class I took was a senior seminar course, and they required you to have completed an internship to get the credits for that class.
Gotcha.
So, or actually, no, it might have been that you passed the class and then you needed to get credits for the however it worked, I had to do an internship. So,
okay.
I lucked out in that my stepdad was best friends in high school with like one of the production heads there.
Okay.
So I had that connection and it was nearby. Nice. And I was like, okay, yeah, I could try it and go for this. So I came on as an intern in May of 2018, and I kind of just like sort of watched everyone for like that first like 2 weeks or so. It was just a lot of like watching everyone do stuff and like trying to pick up tips from them.
Okay.
And then I kind of fell into because my stepdad, when he went to his friend, was like, "Oh, he's really into editing. You give him some editing work." So
gotcha.
At one point,
they always need editors.
Exactly. Yeah. So I sat in with one of their editors working on their like main show at the time, and she ended up quitting, I want to say like 2 or 3 weeks after my internship started. But I already had sat in with her a lot and like learned how to, the one big thing I was worried about is they used Avid and I had no clue how to use Avid. Yeah, so that was mostly learning, absorbing like, here's how you do this. Here's what this show looks like. Here's how you put together this program. And so then when she quit, they were like, well, Jacob sat in with her for like 2 weeks. He knows what he's doing. Let's have him do whatever she was doing. So then over those next few weeks, my main thing was like working on that show and churning out segments for it. And by the end of the internship, they were like, oh, Jacob knows what he's doing. I guess we'll bring him on freelance. So
awesome.
Yeah. So the internship ended. They brought me on freelance. Still kind of did mostly editing, but like a mismatch of stuff here and there. Yeah. And then finally this past September, they brought me on full time as like an editor director, which was really exciting.
Yeah. Congratulations on that, by the way. That's awesome. That's like I do freelance work at PBS, and it's always been like a really cool place to work. Like,
yeah. Everyone there is super great.
Yeah. And like I'm very unfamiliar with Avid, and yet there are projects in there that are like they're in Avid, so you have to work on them in Avid.
Right.
And like I love working in Adobe Premiere Pro, but it's always been a thing where like if I'm there and I have to work in Avid, I've always found that people are very helpful at like, okay, this is how you do that, and they'll set you up, and they'll appreciate that you're gonna ask the question instead of spending like 2 hours just trying to figure it out. Yeah. Avid can be rough, but
I think it's, if you have a lot of experience with Premiere, I think that it is helpful in making that leap. But it's still super weird because I still edit from Premiere at home. So there'd be times where I would edit all day in Avid and then come home and try and do the same shortcuts in Premiere and be like, why isn't this working? So that's a little rough. But
I do that with switching between Mac and PC. I'll hit like Alt S instead of Control S on a PC, and I'm like, why am I not saving? Like I thought I saved. That can get dangerous. All right. Well, speaking of editing, actually, we wanted to chat some editing advice.
Okay.
And the first thing on our list was searching for tutorials.
Yeah, that was like whenever I wouldn't know how to do something, my go-to is usually to just like look up how do you use a mask, or how do you use a LUT, like just basic things like that,
or like chroma keying.
Exactly. Yeah. So most of my things I learn is either like messing around trying to like break the program, or just looking up how other people do it and like just lifting their strategies and adopting them. So
that's where like watching a whole bunch of stuff comes in too. Like I feel like that's a great you know, part of adopting other people's strategies is consuming material. And being able to like look at a variety of different things and be like, oh, well, this worked really well because of this, and I could use it in this project. Being able to like extrapolate that information.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, those tutorials, like I'm the same way. For me, it's not so much about necessarily knowing how to do something. It's about knowing how to find out how to do something.
Right.
And how to do so quickly. Like YouTube has always been a huge resource for me. Like we talked beforehand about a couple of people. I wanted to mention to you, there's a guy that I watch for gear type stuff where it's not necessarily about editing. It's Gerald Undone. He does these breakdown videos of like, you know, this is this mic compared to that mic, and this is the patterns, and like he'll show you the data, which is like, oh, I love that. He did one on sensors recently, and like what the ratings and the ratios and all that stuff, and he got really in depth with it, and it was like, I love that material.
Yeah.
But you talked about Matt Johnson, and I'd heard about him too.
Yeah.
I love his material, and he does great editing, production.
He's
all
super
kinds of
thorough
stuff.
about everything.
Yeah. How did you kind of run into him?
Well, I kind of got into him because sort of earlier on, I forget when exactly, but I got asked by like friends and families to do like recording their like events or like the weddings and stuff like that they would want to do, and coming at it from the approach of like making a short film. I didn't like it's such a like people would think, oh, you just pick up the camera and press record, but like they're two totally different beasts. So it's like
organizing the shoot is just totally different.
Yeah. So I kind of at first I took it like the same approach that I would take to making a short film, where I would just like get my camera, I'd slap a shotgun mic on top and run it to like my audio recorder and just walk around with a little shoulder mount. But it's so much more complicated than that. So I did a couple weddings like that just because it was the only way I knew how to do it. And then I kind of was thinking about it, and I was like, this would be a good way to make some extra money. Maybe I should try and be more like professional about this. So I started booking a few gigs that were not friends or family. It was just people that like found out about me through friends, or my fiance would recommend. She's part of like a bridal show Facebook group, and would always be like, if anyone needs a videographer, my fiance is really good at it. So that,
nice.
I'd get recommendations from other people, and people would reach out to me and say, hey, can you do my wedding? And at that point I was like, oh, okay, I need to get really serious about this. And one of my big things was like trying to improve my audio setup to like, so it's not just a one shotgun mic on top of my DSLR. So I found his video on like, here's how you mic the bride, the groom, and the officiant, and here's all the audio gear I use, and that was, I thought, super helpful.
I remember watching that video like not too long ago.
Yeah,
like that was a big.
It's great. Yeah. So I went out and I bought some of the gear he recommended, and I did like one or two weddings using a lot of his techniques, and I was like, oh man, this is a lot easier now that I know what I'm doing. So like every time I'm like, I wonder how I do this, or like how I should approach this idea, it's always check and see if he has a video about it. And more often than not, he does. Yeah. So
he does that like really in-depth stuff too, where he'll talk about, okay, if you shoot it this way, then you can use it this way in post.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like, I remember a video that he did, I think it was on like using different frame rates.
Yeah.
In a shoot, and using it like for a specific purpose. So like, in my head, it was always like, okay, I'm either going to shoot at 24 frames a second or 120 frames a second. No in between.
Exactly.
Like I have no use for 60p at all. Like nothing. At 30 is like, unless I'm shooting TV news, don't touch it. You know, this guy, he goes through, like I'm going to link this video just because I love the way that he talks about, you can shoot 24 for things that you want in real time, 30 for things that you want to just slow down a little bit and have a little bit dreamy, or use it in real time. Like you can kind of go both. And then 60 is half time. And then 120 is like, you can go up to like 1/5 speed. And like, oh God, like the way that he uses that stuff is so poignant. It's great. Yeah. It's it benefits the story, that's what it's all about, is using these techniques to tell the story.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's super helpful too, because a lot of times, I don't know if this is a problem with like other people, but I tend to, when I'm shooting, I'm just like, okay, this is what I need to do to get the shot. I'm not really thinking about what post-production is going to be like. And then I'm kicking myself later being like, why is this not a slower frame rate? Or why did I not stabilize this better? Like, so it's helpful to kind of get that perspective on like, here's why you have to think about things so far down the line. Yeah.
I've been doing that recently, actually, where I started using this monopod for a shoot, and it was a very mobile shoot that we had to like run and gun and do a whole bunch of stuff. And then at the end of it, we sat down for an interview, and the one camera we had on sticks, the other camera we had on the monopod, but I still had my hands on it just to like, make sure my camera didn't fall over. I was kind of worried. it was one of those monopods that still had the feet. So it would have stood by itself. But, if someone takes a step, it's going to shake.
Exactly.
Things like that.
Yeah.
And I thought that it was like super, super steady. I was using a lens that didn't have stabilization. The camera body that I have, the FS5, doesn't have like in-body stabilization. So it wasn't like stabilizing the lens at all. And when you look at the shots cut together, like it's not bad.
But it's
like,
noticeable.
It's noticeable because one has zero movement. The tripod, no movement at all. And on mine, it's like this little tiny, just little bit of shifting. And it's like, you can just see that I'm standing there going, like just trying not to move. And it's those little things where like, if I was aware of what that looked like in post-production, because I hadn't really used that monopod before.
Right.
Like I hadn't tried to be perfectly still with it. It had always been just kind of run and gun stuff. If I had experimented more often than that would have given me the foresight during production to be like, this isn't going to work for post, and then taking it off and put it on top of something and left it there. And that kind of brings us to our next point is a huge thing for the editing process is experimenting with like special effects or experimenting with shots that you want to achieve. I mean, like you mentioned, it was one of the short films you were working on where you wanted to do an effect with a shadow. Yeah,
that was a lot of the times when I'm trying to figure out how to do something. I'll write out what, obviously it all starts with the script. So then I'll look at the script and say, okay, now how could I, before I go and shoot it, one of the things I think is is this possible to achieve with my means in post-production? And if it's not, then I'll go back and change it. But one thing that I never ended up releasing this short kind of bugs me because I just wasn't proud of it, and some things I wish could have been better. But maybe I'll remake it someday. But the point of it was it was a horror short, and there was a shot where a character was against a wall, and the sun was setting, and there was a long shadow against the wall she was leaning against, and I wanted her shadow to like reach up and like wave right at the camera, independent of what she was doing.
Gotcha.
So it was a lot of like, okay, how do I'll just put two shots on top of each other, and I'll like just crop it so that way but then you have that line, and it's like, okay, well, great, how do I get rid of that line? So then it's looking up, okay, here's what feathering is, and here's how you can blend and make sure things are a little more seamless, and here's
going in and like rotoscoping
exactly. Yeah. So it's a lot of when I need to learn something, it's relying on tutorials and what other people do, and sort of appropriating their techniques for my own, which I think like is kind of inherent no matter who you are, because I mean, you got to learn from somebody. I mean, like you can only learn so much if you just sit down in front of Premiere and you have a couple clips to work with. You're only going to learn so much messing around on your own. You kind of need someone to point you in, like, here's how you use this, here's how you do that. So
like you can learn all these things on your own, but it's one of those things where like it's going to cost you in some way. Like either you pay to learn it somewhere, or you take the time to find a person to learn from, or you go out and you make all these mistakes on yourself, like by yourself, and you pay for it in time.
Exactly.
So there's a cost either way. And if you can find the resources that have that information, they've already made the mistakes for you.
Exactly.
You can learn off of them. And I feel like we've talked about this channel before, but I can't believe that I didn't write it down. Film Riot. Have you heard of them?
But I'm not super familiar with their stuff.
Okay. I'd like, as someone who went to Full Sail, like Ryan Connolly from Film Riot, he went to Full Sail. Like he's an alumni, and that's why he started his channel. I'm pretty sure it was like a project at Full Sail. And then it slowly became like, in his intro, he used to say, welcome to Film Riot, where you learn the tips and tricks and blah, blah, blah. Join me as I learn to become a filmmaker. So it was all about like him figuring things out and testing stuff out. So like his first videos are all like super DIY rigs and how to build a rain rig out of PVC piping for like $50, like really inexpensive options on things. And then now he's at the point where he's like shooting short films with anamorphic lenses and explosions, and you know, there's actors with fly rigs, so like they can get launched into the air but not die, you know. So it's like serious productions, and that, like, if you haven't checked it out, that's a channel that, like, if you go back in their postings, you go to like the oldest videos, you can see
it's like super humble beginnings.
Yeah, you can see it all started with, like, you know, a tiny point and shoot or something like that, and they were just trying to make special effects as best they could, and then it gets to the point where now they're using like red cameras and just crazy expensive stuff, but they actually talk about like every step along the way.
Okay,
so it's super helpful. I love Film Riot.
I'll have to check them out. Yeah.
So I just wanted to add them to the list before we go to the next one. So
okay,
we talked about experimenting, and that's sort of like when you have ideas that you want to enact. This is sort of more outside ideas, and I see them as like challenges.
Yeah.
We talked about trying things based on need. So like a client comes up to you, or someone's like, hey, so I need a commercial that we want, you know, our dog to fly. Or something like just something that's like, okay,
how am I gonna do that?
Yeah, and then using those as inspiration to like try and figure things out. Have you had any gigs that, you know, really threw something out at you?
One of the weddings I did, they were like, I'm not sure what the exact reasoning was, but a lot of people opt to not have like DJs or sound systems at all. And I was like, okay, great. How am I gonna record this and make it sound good? So it's a lot of I think for that particular scenario, I just sort of set up a task cam with a shotgun mic off to the side and just hoped the audio was good, and it wasn't. But it's a lot of messing it around and like trying to. It's just working with what you have, and if in that scenario it didn't work, so then you take that experience later and say, okay, clearly this audio is too echoey. There's too many people talking in the background, messing with what I'm trying to focus on. How do I make this sound better? Like the tutorials I mentioned, Matt Johnson's videos certainly help out with trying to pick up new skills and whatnot. But if you're in a scenario where it's just not within your means to do the absolute best, you just kind of have to say, okay, well, this is what I have available, and how can I make this the best that it can be under my circumstances. So and sometimes it's not going to be the best by any means at all, like with that scenario, but it's like I said, you learn why that didn't work, and you take that knowledge with you into the next project. But I've definitely come across scenarios like that, and if it's a more controlled scenario, like that short film I mentioned, where some things just didn't work. I still have I have the luxury of I don't have to deliver that to anybody. I don't have to. I don't have to post that if I don't want to. So there are times where it's like, okay, I don't have a choice here. It's going to have to not be up to my standards. But a lot of times, if you're in like filmmaking, you're the only one you have to answer to, so you do have that luxury to keep on going back and trying again and again. That's
something that I've been getting at PBS, like where I'll be out on a news gig or something like that, and you know, there'll just be a scenario that we're not expecting. Like the other day there was a shoot that we did. It was in like a manufacturing warehouse. So there were machines going like crazy, and we just had to do the interview there because we wanted to get sort of location. So we made it work. Like we used a lav mic, and we just decided that the background noise was going to have to be okay. Look, we'll use it as like environmental sound. And so with that, then we also got some audio of just the noise by itself. So then we could like plug it in throughout and make it sound like we meant to do that.
Exactly.
Like it's just, you know, all little things of mitigating those tiny disasters at the time where you're like, crap, I can't do the thing that I thought I could do.
Exactly.
And then you figure out a way to do.
And it's also, I should mention, it's a lot of trying to anticipate what's going to go wrong, because nothing is ever going to go 100% to what you think it's going to be.
Absolutely.
Like with that one wedding, the thing that I wish I had anticipated was that like their kids come to weddings and they're going to cry when you have to sit still for hours on end listening to speeches and all that. So all of my audio was littered with like kids like crying and whining and being like, I want to go play. So it's just like, but if you think ahead and you're like, okay, well, kids are going to maybe be making noise. Can I position it away from them, or can I have like a backup mic somewhere that's closer to whoever's talking? And that was a scenario where I kind of didn't anticipate the things that could go wrong in that. But again, it's like you take that knowledge with you. So it's a lot of knowing that things are going to go wrong and trying to anticipate the best you can. Yeah. And you're not always going to be able to, but it's nice to have as many backups as you can.
Yeah. And that comes into like being able to constantly learn too when you're on set. It's like, okay, I'm in a situation where I think this should work, but it's not working. So now you have to like learn a new method right away, which is that's always a cool challenge.
Yeah.
Okay, there was a gig that I wanted to mention.
Okay.
I feel like you would understand how nightmarish this would be.
Okay.
So I was asked to produce a commercial for a vending machine company. This was when I lived up in Canada and right before Canada was moving towards like legalization.
Right.
So it was a vending machine for cannabis products.
Okay.
And this vending machine was bright green, like literally chroma key green. And they've got it in this like maybe 15 by 15 foot room. Nothing big. It's like dingy lighting, kind of a gross space. It's like in construction.
Right.
And they're like, okay, so we want this on a pure white background and we want it keyed out by itself and all this. And I'm just sitting there going, okay. So I tried using, like, first of all, I got enough blue backdrops to just literally duct tape them to all the walls and just cover the entire space. I was like, all right, this should work. At least it's a different color from the green.
Yeah.
I start filming and I notice, okay, there's a big blue reflection on this entire thing. How do I do this? And it was just like, it became like I had like a day to produce it. So I just sort of did the best that I could. I ended up with, that big blue splotch on the side.
Yeah.
But then it got to a point where I was like, you know what? Maybe I can shift that blue to like white, make it look like just a reflection of a light. And instead of chroma keying the entire background, I'll just rotoscope this thing.
Yeah.
And it's like moving shots where like I'm kind of like swirling around it and just spent so much time in post, but I got it done. Like it's one of those things where that was a huge learning process for me. I lost so much money and time like doing that because I like quoted them beforehand and then figured out what they wanted. That was a process. But
yeah, I can totally identify with that. Yeah.
That's one of those challenges where now if someone's like, hey, we need to rotoscope a vending machine.
Now you know how to
do it.
Do it. Exactly, yeah.
I know what not to do.
And you know how to properly quote them, the most important thing.
Exactly, yeah. That's the other thing. I'm not working myself into a hole for that.
Exactly, yeah. That same wedding where I had the bad audio, I ran into a problem where I shot it, I edited it, and I was like, oh man, like audio's not that great, but I'm like really proud of how this looks. And I sent it to the couple and they were like, this is really good, but we want you to go back in and add a bunch of reaction shots from the crowd. We don't really want to see us that much in the final product. And I was wow. And you're telling me this after I've shot it.
Yeah. Oh, like, no.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like, yeah, that's something you could have included in the request.
Exactly. Yeah. Which I mean, like, there's nothing wrong with that, but just like tell me beforehand.
Yeah. Yeah. Like offering that information is.
Yeah.
And that's another one of those learning processes where next time you're like, so what do you want in your film?
Yeah.
What is it? All right. So our next point we were going to talk about was for tips for editors for how to get started. And I like to, like, my big thing recently, people always ask me like, what camera should I get? What's the best photo camera? What's the best camera for video or something like that? And I'm like, it's the one you have with you.
Exactly.
Like whatever's available, you know? So starting with like free options or just whatever's within your grasp.
Yeah.
Like what you talked about your history with that, with editing programs.
Yeah. I started off just like borrowing. My first camera was like a little point and shoot that my mom got for like family events that could record like somewhat decent video. It had a terrible onboard mic, but we didn't really care about audio at the time. So, and then editing was just around the same time I got into making videos. My mom had bought an iMac, and that came pre-installed with iMovie 09. So I was like, okay, I'll just dump everything into here, and I'll try my best to like somehow make this something coherent. So it's circumstances just kind of worked out for me there, that I just had like the bare necessities kind of available to me.
Okay.
But I think a lot of people get bogged down with wanting to make something perfect right from the get-go, and that's not going to be the case ever. I forget I think it was Ira Glass said something like, this is like going like going way above what we're talking about, but he had said something akin to everyone has like a threshold for what their tastes are when it comes to like me, for instance. Like, one of the things I really like to make is horror based short films.
Yeah.
So I have like a threshold of like, this is what I think is scary, this is what I think is good in a horror film. And if I'm just starting out, my ability to make something that meet that threshold is just not there.
Yeah.
So it's, the whole process is about learning to kind of meet that threshold of quality, and it's going to be a long and slow process. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is that when they get into making anything, really, it could be like being a sketch artist or a musician, your ability to meet your threshold is never going to be at your threshold when you start out. So I think it's a lot of recognizing it's going to be a learning process, and I'm going to get there eventually, but it's going to be a lot of hard work. And oftentimes getting bogged down with like, is this the right camera I should be using? Is this the right audio equipment?
Is this the right pencil?
Exactly. Yeah. It's that's not what's important. Is that you go out and you make a bunch of stuff, and like we had said, you fail at making that stuff, and then you take those failures and turn them into lessons and apply it to the next thing, and then take those failures and just you keep on going forever. So it's, a lot of people I think are so obsessed with what's the nicest thing that I can get, what's the best way to do this, when you should just be focused on, I want to make something.
Yeah.
Like that should be your only priority. And then
creating stuff.
Well, not your only, but your first priority should be, this is what I want to make, and I want to make it. What do I have available to make it? And if you have the means to go get a nice camera, great, but you shouldn't let that prevent you from creating. I think is the key point.
Yeah, that's the big thing.
Yeah.
I see a lot of people who are like I see posts on groups on Facebook, especially, where they're like, hey, so I've got, a script written, and I've got actors who are interested, and I've got like all this stuff in place. What camera should I buy? And everyone's like, well, what camera do you have? Like, just shoot it. Just, I don't care. Like, shoot it with your cell phone. Like,
there's movies now being made that are like on the newest iPhone.
Yeah.
And they're good. Well, not like you can, if you know what you're talking about, you can tell the quality, but like, it's still viable now.
Exactly.
Is the point.
Yeah. Like there's that video, the snowball fight that the fight choreographer from,
I forget,
John Wick.
Yeah.
Did it. And it's like, it's captivating.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and it's all about choreography and camera motion and things like that. It's not about the camera.
Exactly.
Like, no one cares what it was shot with. I mean, except for the fact that they advertised that because it was shot with an iPhone.
Right.
But like, there's a movie Steven Soderbergh shot with an iPhone, and it was one of those things where like, I didn't know it at the time. Like, I didn't go into the film knowing that he shot it with an iPhone.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched the entire thing. I love the movie, and afterwards realized it and was like, oh, wait, really?
Yeah.
I went back and watched it again and was like, oh yeah, that totally was shot with a cell phone. But it's not something that's on my head, and I'm like a camera guy, so I would think that if anyone, I'd be thinking about that. But yeah, that's a big thing, is just go out and do it. Like, you got to grind the experience before you can really put it to good use.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like you give a guitar to a monkey, they're not going to be able to play a song.
Yeah.
Like, but if you give them like 2 sticks, they can make a competent beat if you teach them.
Yeah. And you just build from there. That's what it's all about. So this kind of brings us back to that other point. We touched on this for a minute, but just reading and watching and consuming everything, not even just the stuff that you like. So I've kind of run into a mentality with some people where they're like, well, I'm recording an album, so I'm not going to listen to any music for the next like 6 months, or I'm only going to listen to this one thing for 6 months.
Yeah.
And that's like, I want that to be the inspiration for this.
Right.
I always find it so much more effective when people are just like constantly consuming things and they have all these different influences, so you can glean all of the best little details along those. And then you can also look at things that you don't like. Like I started watching TV shows that I like. I watched the first episode and I'm like, this show made me upset. I have to finish it now. Like I just went through 8 seasons of a show that like the last episodes were like infuriating to me. But I could actually sit down afterwards and talk about like, okay, this drove me nuts because, you know, they fired a gun inside of a car. It was like a fully automatic assault rifle with the closed windows. Yeah. And then they had a conversation afterwards and no one's wearing any earplugs. It's like, that's not how it would work.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So like it would show me what meant a lot to me in film presentation. Yeah. So like, what are some things that you've run into in that sort of style?
Well, it's sort of like with anything, I kind of, if I see something and I don't like it, my immediate thought is like how I would have handled it if I was in charge. And that's like also kind of dangerous because like that can feed your ego a lot. But, but I think, I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
This is with like watching bad, like things that make you upset or like just things that you don't like and consuming that media anyway so that you can figure out what, like why you don't like it and why you would do it differently and how you would do it differently.
Yeah, I think that's really important to the learning process is like it defines that threshold that I had mentioned.
Yeah, that's such a great point.
Yeah, but it also is like, okay, here's what not to do. And here it's like, it's free advice. It's like, avoid this and you're good to go. Like, and that's sort of ties into the other point a little bit. 'Cause when you'd said like, I'm only going to listen to this one thing, or I'm going to exclude myself from listening to other things. I think a lot of people get bogged down, with originality and like worrying if their ideas are original or not. And that kind of prevents them from taking that first step. I don't want to detract from the question, but that is something that popped into my mind. It's a lot of people are like, oh, well, that's too much like Inception, or like, oh, that's too much like this other movie. So they won't even try. But I think a lot of times people have to realize that like to an extent, everything has kind of been done before. So it's like taking that and sort of putting your own original twist on it. And you shouldn't have to worry if like your idea is like the most 100% original thing. It's like, it's taking something pre-existing and putting your own unique twist on it.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing that kind of prevents people from taking that first step. But in terms of like absorbing content, I think that's like invaluable. Like if you like, if you're a writer and you just don't read books, then you're not going to like, you'll become so far removed that it just is not going to work. You're not going to be able to make that jump, or you just won't be happy with it even if you do.
Exactly.
So it's I don't know, it's just sort of, and also exposing yourself to everything. Like I didn't necessarily know that I wanted to make scary stuff when I was just starting out.
Right. Okay.
My starting off point was making these comedy sketches, and then when I started to kind of watch a lot of horror related stuff, I was like, oh man, that's really effective. And I kind of was a fan of like scary movies, scary stories and all that. And I was like, oh, that's something I could try. So then that kind of influenced a lot of the short films that I would make when I was in college, is like trying to like sort of hone my craft. Cause, and so the point being, a lot of times you might not even know what you want to do, but then by absorbing stuff that you may not even have considered, it'll give you that path.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like there was, like I recently got back into listening to books, which I've just been so bad about reading in the past probably 10 years. I think it was something with like required reading in high school and then like having to read just textbooks in college that I just like, I couldn't stand it for a couple of years. And my writing for film, it all suffered. Like I was good at writing TV type stuff because I was watching a lot of TV. When I started to watch more film stuff, I was getting better at like film scripting. But as soon as I started to actually like listen to books on tape, like just hearing the way that they write things and the way, like the order in which they'll describe something, where it's like, you know, so-and-so walked into a room and saw this and blah, blah, blah. And it's all visual and then smell and then feeling and then emotion. Like it just goes down the line and you get so much detail that I'm sitting there and I can see the entire thing in my head. And
but it's translating that.
And I had sort of forgotten that, you know, and there's something about writing and there's something about that style, that medium, that it allows for imagination that I think for filmmakers and directors and stuff like that is really important because it exercises that visualization.
Yeah. You're not going to be a good bodybuilder if you just are like, I'm not going to go to the gym for a month. You need to work out that creative muscle.
Exactly.
If you're going to do anything worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like with the gym thing, it's like you also can't, you know, get great at it and if you're just doing the same thing all the time. Like you have to have outside influences and stuff like that and accept, you know, the outside world and bring that into you and adjust it for your own thing. You know? Awesome. So this last little section I wanted to talk about is as someone who's like, you know, making films and working in the industry, let's talk equipment for a little bit. Okay. I love equipment. And I just so we talked about upgrading and like where the real, like the first echelons of value that you can get for like lower cost, great value, audio upgrades. Yeah. You recently made some upgrades and that's been a big step for you.
Well, that was the thing that sort of started that, like I said, was watching like Matt Johnson's, like, here's how all the audio gear I use for a wedding. And then once I invested in like some of it, but then when I stepped back, I was like, oh, this isn't just like a single use thing. I can appropriate it for like a whole bunch of other uses. So like I had mentioned earlier, like the whole podcasting element that I might want to get into. I was like, oh man, I have the right equipment here to try this out. Or, oh, now I have this nicer microphone that I could hide in this shot if I do a short film. I don't have to just have a little shotgun on top of my camera. So
exactly.
It's it's been it's really fun to kind of expand my arsenal of toys.
And audio is huge. Like
people don't realize that. Like if you could have the best looking image ever, but if you're like, wait, what did they say? Then the whole thing falls apart.
Jackie and I were talking about that. She came in for a podcast. It was the last episode actually. What is it? We talked about, because she had done a student film presentation, so they actually like presented their films in AMC Theater.
I wish I could have gone to that.
That was
I missed out on
it. Was such an interesting experience because like everyone's producing on, you know, a screen typically with stereo monitors. Yeah. So I realized, like, I had done the editing for for her piece that was in there. And it was one of those things where I realized afterwards, I'm like, I should have mixed in surround sound. Like,
exactly.
I didn't even think about that because in the venue it's surround sound. So the only speakers that you heard were the ones that were right up in the front. If you're sitting in the back, you probably didn't hear it. Like
exactly. Yeah.
So like there's things that you learn there, but then it was also okay. She mentioned the biggest like the pieces that everyone enjoyed the most when they presented them were the ones that had the best audio. Yeah. Like there was one piece in particular, it was like two people having like it was like a tense conversation in a car, which is like a really, like, it's hard to get a microphone in there, but it's a great dead space to record audio. Like I've done voiceovers in cars before, and it's just like, if you don't have a sound booth, it's great. But
all that padding kind of like muffles everything too. I hadn't even thought of that until now.
And so because they were using a shotgun mic for it too. Yeah. They would put the shotgun just out of frame, like right next to the person, and then they'd say their line, and then they'd like move the camera and move the mic so it's like 8 inches away from that person's mouth.
Right, yeah.
So they just got incredibly good audio. And everyone loved that piece. Like it was applause right afterwards. And that, you know, that made a huge difference because there were pieces that were shot really well and edited really well that just had bad sound. Yeah. And you could just kind of like write them off right away. It was rough, like, but it does make a huge difference. And there's things that you can do like these Lyx Pro, LYX Pro mics. This is a $100 set of matched stick condensers, but you get a super cardioid capsule, which is what we have on right now.
Yeah.
Cardioid, which is a little bit wider pattern, and
Right.
then omnidirectional, which would be just everywhere.
Yeah.
But that's like $100, and you get a whole bunch of different ways to use these things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like so far, I think they're pretty good. What do you think? Leave us a comment down below. This is the first podcast that we're using these on because we don't quite have the setup that I was shooting for, but it's amazing how much like a little difference in microphones makes a huge difference in post.
Yeah.
Like what are some of your like favorite audio pieces that you've used?
The one that I like, my first big audio investment that I've gotten a ton of mileage out of was my Tascam DR60D Mark II. Okay. It's like the little brick that has like there's I think 3 inputs, 2 XLR, 1 3.5 millimeter. You can record up to like 4 channels, a whole bunch of different settings. But that I got that because the equipment that they offered us to rent, well, like rent in air quotes, they just borrow it out of Kutztown, was it was a Canon T3i and then bundled with a Tascam DR60D, and that was like what we would use to shoot our projects on.
Gotcha.
So I knew that worked. So like once I started to kind of get towards the end of my career at Kutztown, I was like, I'm not going to have access to this equipment anymore. I need to start investing in it. So that was the first piece I got because I knew my audio wasn't great, and so I invested in a Tascam DR60D Mark II. And then from there, it's been kind of like basing all my purchases based on what's going to work with that. I think I used like that little mini, I don't know the exact model, but like the Rode mic, the kind of longer one, not like the little ball.
Oh yeah, okay.
I forget what the model is, but I used that for the longest time, just going into the 3.5 millimeter jack.
Yeah,
and then
gives you much more directional audio.
Right. Yeah, and then I ended up getting a nicer shotgun mic. I think it was the XM55. Because it was marked down on Amazon one day, and then that came with a bunch of cables and whatnot, and that was around the time I bought that. I was taking an audio course, and I learned the whole difference of like this is what balanced audio is, and 3.5 is not a terribly great signal. You got to go XLR or quarter inch. So I kind of lucked out there, and then when I got into like Matt Johnson stuff, that's when I got the 2 Tascam DR10Ls for like the little lavalier microphones. And then most recently I got from Neewer, I saw they had a deal where it was like for $20 you could get 2 dynamic mics on Amazon. So I got those just because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with 2 mics, but $20 for 2 mics is a great deal. So I got that. And then that was sort of when I was like, oh man, I have the right setup for a podcasting setup.
Nice. Okay.
So, but yeah, that's been sort of my main thing is like sort of expanding that, because I'm pretty happy with how like the lenses and whatnot I have. I mean, I would like to upgrade my camera eventually, but I'm pretty happy with my camera bag as it is. But I always feel like audio is something I could be continuously improving on. Audio and lighting, but mainly audio. So
I feel like there's a low cost floor on audio too. Like you can do, like I was mentioning beforehand, like at one point there was I was trying to shoot videos outside where I'm doing like talking head stuff, and I'm like, this is the blah 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 blah, and then I like walk off frame. Yeah. And it's like, if I really wanted to know that I was gonna get great audio and I was shooting myself, like I couldn't, monitor myself and do all that stuff at the same time. I basically just took a cell phone, got a $9 lavalier mic off of 3.5 mil lavalier mic, plugged it into my cell phone, hit the audio recorder which comes with my phone, put it in my pocket, and rolled like that, and it was exponentially better than me trying to do like just the onboard mic and like yell at my camera.
And you always, if you're outside, there's no matter how nice it is, you always get the little one of like the wind. And I that was one thing I always hated about not having a good audio setup, is like I would just base everything inside, because I knew the second I go outside the audio is bad. There's just so much more environmental effect there. So that's a huge list. Audio is definitely a good one, and I think you touched on another good point, is Neewer. I love Neewer's products.
They're such a great brand when it comes to like good quality stuff at like a ridiculously low price for what it is.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's maybe not the most like if you throw it against a wall, it'll probably break. But if you're careful with it and if you use it in a proper way, like it's going to give you some really good mileage.
Exactly.
Like these scissor arm stands are all newer.
Yeah.
They're like, I think $12 you can get them. And then like
something like that.
The other options are like $30, $50.
Right.
And if you're doing like a podcasting stuff, like I got like 4 of these so that I could do, 4 people sitting at a table chatting. I didn't really need it at the time, I realized, but it's one of those things where like the cost was so low, so I could give it a try, and it didn't like break my bank. Like that was the cost of like one really nice scissor arm stand, which now I realize I have no need for. Like those gas ones that are like really intense. It's like, it's cool, but I can make this work just fine.
Right. Yeah. And that sort of ties back into the whole like wanting to have like the nicest, newest thing.
Yeah.
And like, ooh.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it sort of ties into the like wanting to have the nicest, newest thing, and sort of being intimidated by that like $30 to $50 range for something as simple as that. But I most of my products I get are from them, just because it's like you said, if you're careful with it, you'll get a ton of mileage out of it, and then it's good. So yeah, I've yet to use a product of theirs that I'm like not happy with. Yeah,
like I haven't been upset about any purchase that I've got from them, which is pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on and chatting.
Of course, thank you for having me.
And editing and all that stuff. Jacob Boyer, thank you so much. Is there any links that we can offer for the viewers out there to find you at?
Well, my channel, I've been neglecting it for a while. It's just my name, Jake Boyer, at YouTube. I've got an Instagram where I sort of mostly focus on like my media related stuff with like PBS or freelancing and all that. That's just Jacob Boyer Media. Awesome. I'm working on getting I think I do have a Facebook page under Jacob Boyer Media, but I haven't really like set it up yet. And then I have a website I'm working on as well. But yeah, awesome. Those will be up hopefully sometime soon.
Sweet.
So that's where you can find me.
Wicked. All right. We'll have those links down in the description. Thank you again.
Of course. Thank you so much.
We'll have to chat again with you soon.
Definitely. I'd love that.
And thank you again for watching another episode of the FCMG podcast. As always, peace.